The African continent has an extensive history of interaction with Abrahamic religions. Christianity and Islam are well documented within the continent, but seldom do we explore the history of Judaism in Africa. With modern-day movements within the African diaspora, this history is being advanced within the social framework of public consciousness. What about the world? Is your boy home? Senior, and I'm back at another video of African history, culture, and worldview. Remember, if you want access to sources, courses, exclusive videos, or you just want to support Africarized, you can join the membership through the link in the description box below. It's no surprise that scholars are having to address the history of Judaism in Africa due to the rise of the Black Hebrew Israelite community. The Hebrew Israelites have done a fantastic job at moving the discussion through grassroots efforts in urban communities. Their narrative has become so potent that it even influenced the minds of popular hip-hop artists like Kendrick Lamar. "I'm Israelite, don't call me black no more. That word is only a color, it ain't who I am." This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Hebrew Israelite influence in popular culture. My last video about the top 10 African ethnic groups taken in the Atlantic slave trade spurred a debate about Hebrews, like claims concerning biblical prophecies, and how black people in the diaspora may reflect this history. A lot of you have been messaging me to share my thoughts on the topic. I thought it would be an interesting topic to analyze, but more importantly, I wanted to go into the details of some of the major claims and compare them to what we know about West African history. So here it goes. First, we're going to discuss the general history of Judaism in Africa, and then we'll compare them to the Hebrew Israelite ideology and what some scholars have to say. I definitely can't cover everything in this video, so keep in mind that there will be a part 2. Make sure to make comments with any questions or thoughts you have. With any movement around the globe, it's important to have elements of truth in it, and that's how most of them acquired their following. The truth is, there is a history of Jews in Africa. According to most accounts, the earliest Jewish settlements were in North Africa, and it only makes sense for Judaism in Africa to begin in the north as a point of entry from the Levant region where it originated. Jews and Moors, or what we call today Berbers, ultimately interacted with each other, and some Berbers in North Africa actually converted to Judaism. In fact, according to accounts from the 19th century onward, Queen Kahina, a Berber queen who fought against the Arab invasion, was said to have converted to Judaism. Even though this is debated within the scholarly community, it still points to the presence and influence of Judaism in Africa. Pointing further south in Ethiopia, the queen who destroyed the Aksumite Empire was believed by some to have been a Jewish convert. Her name was Queen 𝒩𝒩𝒩, and again, despite the controversy, the knowledge of Judaism in Africa was not foreign or unknown. The most unlikely place people expect a presence of Judaism tends to be West Africa, because it's so far away from the origin of Judaism. Admittedly, the most direct evidence for Jews in West Africa comes from the West African writers themselves and the Tariq al-Fatash. The Tariq al-Fatash is a West African chronicle written in Arabic in the second half of the 17th century, and it provides an account of the Songhai and Mali empires. The Tariq al-Fatash describes a community called the Bani Israel that in 1402 existed in Tinderma, Mali, possessed 333 wells, and had 7 leaders. It even goes on to list the names of these leaders and states that they had an army of around 1,500 men. Apparently, there was a sizable amount of Jews in the Songhai Empire. According to Leo Africanus, the Askia, or king, really wasn't too pleased that they were there. The king is a declared enemy of the Jews. He will not allow any to live in the city. If he hears it said that a Berber merchant frequents them or does business with them, he confiscates his goods. It's important to note that thousands of Jews and Moors during this same period were reportedly expelled from Spain and came to settle in North Africa. But nonetheless, Jews were in West Africa, and Africans and Arabs recorded their presence. There are many more council Jews in Western Africa, but let's discuss the strongest claim from the Hebrew Israelites that supports their narrative. As mentioned before, the Hebrew Israelites claim that Hebrew communities lived in Africa historically. That's true, but their strongest claim comes from Dr. Rudolf Windsor in his book, From Babylon to Timbuktu. There he proclaims a Hebrew Israelite state in West Africa called Camp Nou or Kanem Bornu. The Moorish writer Leo Africanus informs us of the past existence of a medieval Hebrew state called Kemnuria or Kanem-Bornu. In fact, Kemnuria did indeed exist, so Dr. Windsor's credit is very strong. There is very strong evidence that there were Jews living there in Mauritania. According to oral tradition of Western Africa and Arab sources, the first inhabitants of Mauritania were the Judaized people who apparently claimed Jewish origin. The Judaized were pre-Berber people in the region who reportedly were black Africans with some Semitic ancestry. Al-Idrisi, the Muslim scholar and historian, writes, and I quote, "The inhabitants of Kanem, following the saying of merchants, claimed to be Jews." According to Al-Idrisi, when the Islamic Berber Empire of the Almoravids was expanding, they began suppressing the Kanem-Bornu population, and they were left in a state of survival. Only a small group from Kanem remained scattered between the deserts and near the coast, living off dairy products or fish. They led a hard and precarious life, wandering in this territory. Now, like mentioned before, all movements and religions must contain elements of truth to them, and this is by far the strongest and most reliable argument of the Hebrew Israelite community concerning Jews or Hebrews in West Africa. Given all of that, with further analysis of their claims, the scholarly and religious community have many objections. For the sake of time, let's all concede and agree with the position of the Hebrew Israelites that all the Hebrews from Israel all the way to North and West Africa are all black Hebrews. Even if we can see to that point, there are still difficulties with assigning these people not only to the African diaspora but African kingdoms. We'll get into that later. It's important to note that the Hebrew Israelite ideology and belief is very diverse, so we're going to tackle the most popular one. The book From Babylon to Timbuktu and its author, Dr. Rudolf Windsor, is one of the most celebrated history books for most Hebrew Israelites. We'll use his claims from this book and compare it to what we know historically about West African history. Dr. Rudolf Windsor is a Hebrew Israelite himself, and in his book he claims that the kings of the Ghana Empire, also known as Wagadu, who were black Hebrews. The black Hebrew kings of Ghana had two titles, Cuyahoga and Ghana. It's a well-documented fact that the Soninke people founded the Empire of Ghana, not black Hebrews. The Soninke weren't Jews at all. In fact, they had a legend about a giant snake that they made a pact with to sustain their land. According to Soninke oral tradition, the Soninke venerated a giant snake named Bida, and they made sacrifices to him. And I quote, "Every year Bida would receive a maiden and a horse, and in exchange Bida would rain gold upon the land." This obviously has strong religious undercurrents concerning their traditional African belief system, which was the veneration of snakes. Nothing at all within Soninke society points to any Jewish socio-political or religious parentage. Hebrew Israelite scholarship has a tendency to bulk up the presence of Jews in West and Central Africa so that the millions of people, sort of the coast of Africa, will align with their claim that all victims of the Atlantic slave trade are the true and authentic children of Israel. The argument actually crumbles with the numbers. The way they tend to boost these numbers is by claiming the originators of some African empires or kingdoms were black Hebrews and they simply converted to Islam later on, like with the Empire of Ghana and the Songhai Empire. Many Hebrew Israelites claim the original West African Songhai dynasty, known as the Dia or Zhou dynasty, had a line of black Hebrew kings. This founder of the first Sudanic dynasty in Western Africa was a black Jew. His name is sometimes written as Al-Ayaman because it's assumed we can't confirm Ised or Elissa, the religion of the early Dia or Zhou dynasty of the Songhai. Dr. Windsor simply inserts the idea that it was a black Hebrew one, that's Raquel Sudan, which is another chronicle from West Africa, written by an African, makes mention of the Zhou dynasty and its ruler, but does not at all mention that he was a Hebrew or a Jew for that matter. Thankfully today, due to new information, we have some writing from ancient Songhai traditional scribes called the Kamba. This was the earliest Songhai writing system used to communicate largely religious matters. A Songhai historian named Dr. Hassan II Muga has preserved the text of his people and given us insight into the religion of ancient Songhai people. The following is a written Songhai communication between two priests. Peace be upon you. Men and women are greeting you, and the river, the force, and Ganges, the cattle, the birds, and the animals are suffering because of the lack of rain. Peace be upon you. and men and women are greeting you. May the peace of the day and the night be upon you. We must organize the dance. We must sacrifice animal blood and offer it to the 𝒃𝒂𝒏𝒅 to drink. When the Kamba receive such letters from other scribes, they explain or interpret the meaning of such letters. Such letters also can be ordered by the chief of the village, the king, or they can be initiated by the Kamba themselves for the benefit of the population. Now, based off this communication between two 𝒑𝒏 priests or scribes before the advent of Islam, it's clear that the god that they worship, which the 𝒄𝒏 dynasty kings seemingly validated, was not Yah of the Black Hebrews, but 𝒃𝒏𝒊𝒣. Also, nothing in Black Hebrew Israelite culture makes reference to offering animal blood to the 𝒃𝒂𝒏𝒅, which the early 𝒑𝒏 dynasty believed were spirits in human form. We have to ask ourselves, why would Black Hebrew kings of the 𒑑𝒏 allow the worship of 𝒃𝒏𝒊𝒣 and the veneration of 𝒃𝒃𝒏𝒅? These are very difficult questions to answer if we are to subscribe to this idea that the early 𒑑𝒏 kings were Black Hebrews. The fact is, the ancient 𒑑𝒏 dynasties were very clearly not Black Hebrews acquiring any traditions from the Levant region and worship of Yah, but they were West Africans practicing a traditional African belief. By claiming that Ghana and 𒑑𝒏 were originally Hebrews, you automatically boost up the numbers of Hebrews in Africa greatly, along with other independent Jewish communities we see historically. And thus, you can comfortably align yourself for the claim that all of the millions of victims of the Atlantic slave trade are the true and authentic children of Israel. But something to disprove Hebrew Israelite origin and African empires can be difficult, as anyone can insert an Israelite presence with historical gaps. But one thing that seems a little peculiar is Dr. Winsor's claims that the black Jews maintained their history, laws, and written records, and they did not absorb into the African tribes. Instead, the African tribes absorbed into them. The black Jews had an advantage over the African tribes. They carried their culture, history, laws, and written records with them. This assured them a constant precedent for the development of a higher social organization because of the stability of the black Jewish culture. The Jews were not absorbed into the autochthonous population. So according to Dr. Rudolph, the Black Hebrew kings of Ghana and 𒑑𝒏 had the advantage over other Africans because they maintained their culture, written records, laws, and history. Also, these Black Hebrews were not absorbed into the African culture, taking on any of the African cultural, religious, or societal ways, but that the Africans took on the ways of the Black Hebrews. This is a pretty bold and problematic statement because in order for it to be true, the most basic human activity has to accommodate what he's saying, and that's language. The one question we must ask ourselves is this: if these Black Hebrews kept their cultural ways, history, and laws and influenced the Africans, how did they not keep the Hebrew language? How did the language and the writing not influence the local population? And why aren't there any Hebrew history books in West Africa accounting for these African empires? Take, for example, the Tariq al-Sudan and the Tariq al-Fatash. Both of these books were written in Arabic, which is a language brought over from a people also from the Middle Eastern region who clearly brought over their religion, language, history, and laws, influencing the African population. If the Arabs were able to do it, why weren't the Black Hebrews able to keep a simple thing like their language or the Hebrew writing? If millions of them migrated to Africa and built empires and maintained their culture, as he claims is correct, then the Soninka people of the Ghana Empire had to have been absorbed by the culture and laws of the Black Hebrews. If the kings of Ghana or Hebrew Israelites who kept their tradition, why would they give themselves Soninka names instead of Hebrew ones? For example, it was a small list of names from the kings of Ghana that is well documented: King Kayamagan, King Mansa Musa, King Bossi, and King Tunka Manin. The names of these kings don't seem remotely Hebrew or Jewish. In fact, these names are Soninka in origin, with Mansa Musa being a very popular Manda name. The names of these kings also point to the originators of the Ghana Empire, which is obviously African and not Black Hebrew Israelite, as Dr. Windsor proclaims. Also, if the Black Hebrews kept their laws and written records, as Dr. Rudolph claims, why would the Kamba 𒑑𝒏 scribes not be writing in Hebrew script? What reason would they have to invent a totally new writing system and worship a new god named 𝒃𝒏𝒊𝒣 and not Yah? If these Black Hebrews influenced the Africans and kept their Hebrew written records and laws, as Dr. Windsor claims, then the supposed Black Hebrew kings of 𝒑𝒏 would not be writing in an ancient 𝒑𝒏 script. When comparing African history with the most celebrated Hebrew Israelite commentary on Black Hebrew Israelite history, we run into some serious issues. However, even with these historical issues, the Hebrew Israelites, to their credit, made convincing arguments from the Hebrew Bible itself. As parallels between the children of Israel of the Bible and the Atlantic slave trade are bound to be similar, well, I'm all out, guys. In part 2, I'm going to tackle the strong biblical evidence Black Hebrew Israelites use and compare it to biblical scholarship. If you like this video, subscribe and share to your socials. Stay tuned for part 2 as we discuss the history and rise of the Hebrew Israelites and analyze their strongest biblical position. Know thyself, remember your ancestors. Peace